Okay, so let's make a start then. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's China Career Panel discussion, a special career event for Mandarin degree students at LSE. And this event, it is exclusive for our students, and it's really, the purpose is to inspire and to share, but also allow us to connect with each other. So we have three amazing speakers, all from very different culture and industry background to talk about their career, and in particular to talk about how learning Mandarin Chinese and Chinese culture maybe shaped their career and helped advance their career. And to some of them, it just become part of what they do every day now. So today's session, we will, by the way, it is recorded, requested by our students. And what we're going to do is that I will have the pleasure to introduce all our three speakers, and then we will pass on to them. Each of them will have 10 minutes to talk about their unique stories and journey. And then we will pass on to Aidan Cross, one of our student representatives, to chair the most important part of today's session, which is the interaction with our students. And finally, Dr. Mclean, Director of LSE Language Center, will close today's session. So first, let me start with Ilan Bass. He's actually originally from London, so very exciting. Welcome to have you back. I know before pandemic, he was actually based in Shanghai and doing interesting work there. And so Ilan actually worked in several countries, so obviously China, UK, and Israel. And he also have different industry background. So he worked in finance, government, and education. He started his career in London, in London's financial sector, and then he moved to Beijing. I think that's where he started learning Mandarin. And I think he returned to Beijing after his master's to join the newly established Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I think that must be quite exciting story to tell. And currently he works as a relationship manager at a peer-to-peer mentoring community for senior executives and their relation and leadership team in London. Now, our second speaker is Martina Fuchs, and she has different roles. She's an international TV anchor, also business journalist, event moderator, and also expert on China and Middle East. Originally from Switzerland, she speaks 9 languages, very exciting. So she was a CNN Money Switzerland TV anchor and CGTN senior business reporter in Beijing. Maybe that's her first encounter with China. And now she works as a European business correspondent for China's news agent Xinhua, and also an international media ambassador for the Montreux Jazz Festival China, and as advisor for St. Gallen Symposium and the Lang Lang International Music Foundation. So she's traveling between London and Zurich. Last but not least, Matei Negrescu, and he actually also has rich, leadership experience and traveled and lived in 8 different countries and speak 8 different languages, including Mandarin Chinese. And he actually, I think, started in London and also has been learning Mandarin with us at LSE for the last 4 years. And currently, Matei is the head of Renewable North Sea Area Development at Equinor, an international energy company developing oil, gas, wind, and solar energy in more than 30 countries worldwide. In his role, he's responsible for Equinor's regional strategy and early phase offshore wind project in the North Sea. So without further ado, let me just stop sharing and let's pass on to our very first speaker, Ilan.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Xiang. Nice to see everybody here. My name is Ilan. I'm going to share a little presentation with you about my career journey in China. So let me do that now. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my slides? Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to start my timer. Okay, so I got 10 minutes. Right, I might have to go a little bit quickly. So basically, my name's Ilan. I am from London originally. I was born in Israel, and I've also lived in, so as well as living in the UK and Israel, I've lived in China for quite a few years, and also in Italy recently during the pandemic. So I put this slide here just so you can kind of get a little flavor of where I've studied, where I've worked, and I'll actually get into a little that in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. Here is my before China story. So I went to the University of Sheffield. I did East Asian Studies, 3-year degree, and I actually was studying Japanese language at the time. But sometime after that, I was studying a lot about China, of course, and Japan and the Koreas. And sometime after that, I decided when I was working for BNY Mellon in London for a few years until the financial crisis happened, that I would move to China to work on my sort of my undergraduate studies. And actually, an interesting part of this story is that when I was at the bank, I told them that I'd be interested in working for them in Hong Kong. So somehow I wanted to study Mandarin. They had a big office in Hong Kong, and somehow they ended up paying for me to do a Chinese course on the weekends at SOAS. So that was my first foray into Mandarin in 2007. I ended up leaving the bank late 2008, and I moved to Beijing in 2009. So that is the before China story. When I got to China, I was starting off teaching English. I had a couple of friends who were teaching English out there, and you know, that was my route to China. But basically, when I was there, I realized that teaching English wasn't really for me, and so I did some full-time Chinese studies at Tsinghua University, and then fortunately, I managed to find a job working for the British Embassy in Beijing. And yeah, so I had a couple of roles at the embassy. First of all, as an entry clearance officer, and later on as a customer liaison officer. And I think that actually my studies of Mandarin had maybe played some kind of role in getting that promotion at the embassy. I was in Beijing for about 4.5 years, and I as I was in London, I was kind of feeling I'd got a little bit comfortable, and so I made a decision to leave China and go and do my master's degree, which I did at Tel Aviv University in Israel. And I did that in a program called Conflict Resolution and Mediation. So one of the interesting things, so this is my after China story, one of the interesting things about my experience in Israel is that because of my experience in China, I found that it was actually very easy to network with people, Chinese people in Israel. It's actually, I think you should remember that there's a Chinese community probably in every country in the world, and some of them are big and some of them are quite small. And Israel, being a small country, has quite a small Chinese community. So it was quite easy to network with people in the Chinese community in Israel, given my experience living in China. So I did my master's degree. I lived in Israel for a few years, and then I put AIIB on the previous slide. It should have been on this slide. I made these slides very quickly because I've just started a new job last week. I'll talk about that in a second. And basically, I went back to Beijing in 2017 to work for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And I'm quite sure that my experience living in China and my Mandarin skills played a role in being selected to work at AIIB. I was actually the 81st member of staff that AIIB hired. So that was a very interesting experience to be working for AIIB. And then I ended up leaving the bank after a year. It was quite a pressured environment, and I was in a role that kind of I felt was not really well suited for me. And I really wanted to build on my master's degree in conflict resolution. So I left, and I was back in the UK, and I was just kind of I did some volunteer work in the community as a mediator, and that's kind of what's led me to that's what I've been doing a lot in the pandemic. And I'm actually studying at LSE in the Chinese Culture and Language for Business course because I want to improve my Chinese and make it quite sharp in order to be able to do mediation in Mandarin. So that's what I'm working on now. But then a little bit of a curveball was thrown at me, and I got a job in London starting last week for a company called Critical Eye. They call themselves a peer-to-peer board community. And so they help senior executives to sort of develop themselves and their leadership teams. And they actually have a very small office in Hong Kong. And I'm pretty sure as well that my experience living and working in China and my Mandarin studies played a role in me getting that selected for that job recently as well. So just with the second half of my 10 minutes, I wanted to give you some kind of pointers of how you might want to think about your journey to China and making the most of it. So I wanted to share this video with you. Okay, and I'm going to share my share computer. Okay, so I'm going to play this video. You should be able to hear it. Okay. Oh, okay, that's not good. Okay, sorry. Can you hear it? Is that okay? Can somebody maybe tell me if you can hear it?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
怎样？那个南京的 shipment 到达了？
哇，
够了。But 好像那个宁波那个 shipment 是为止，为止什么意思啊？
没问题，
没问题。OK， go， sorry。
应该没问题。
你应该没问题什么意思啊？
你知道每一件成功的事情总会有那么一点点小状况，任何都不例外。
但是你说应该没问题，所以有那个问题的可能性。No。OK，good。
其实还是有那么一点点小状况，可能会有那么
能够控制，对吗？
你知道我们的码头非常非常忙，我们有个非常大的码头，但是码头上面有特别多的人，还有特别多的船，每天都有很多的货要卸。然后昨天我们最重要的工人王大叔，他把自己关到了容器里面，明白？他是唯一一个有那个容器钥匙的人，你知道吗？我们没法从外面把他给救出来，只有他自己有钥匙，他又没法从里面打开容器。
换一个想法说，会不会有问题，还是没有问题？
中国有句老话，
没问题是吗？
孔夫子说
，It's lost, isn't it？
我们的货完蛋了。
Okay, so that is a funny video called Conflict Resolution in China by Mama Huhu. So, I found this really interesting because I studied conflict resolution and I came across this video after I did my master's degree. So even though I knew about Mama Huhu before, and I think basically the point of showing you this video, apart from the fact that it's very funny, is that your studies in Mandarin will become incredibly helpful in helping the companies that you work for in the future to resolve problems and conflicts. And so, you should bear that in mind. Now, being a mediator, one of the ways in which you can do this is to spend a lot of time listening. This mediation is all about listening. That's how you resolve problems with people. And this is the traditional Chinese character for listen, ting. And so you can see the constituent parts of the character is quite interesting. I think listening in Chinese is most likely a deeper concept than we have in English. So you can see the different parts of the character there. It's your undivided attention. You put your heart and your mind into it, and you listen with both your ears and your eyes, and it's got to be complete. So bear that in mind. Your experiences in China will be difficult. They will be complicated, but they're very fun. And if you go there, I just wanted to talk a little bit about if you're humble, if you go there with an open mind, you want to learn about China, be open, be transparent, build trust, build relationships, be respectful of a different culture, you will get a lot out of your China experience. And certainly learning Mandarin is the key to unlocking those wonderful experiences. So I think my 10 minutes is I'm about 20 seconds out. So I just wanted to say sorry for using all of the time to show you that funny video. But thank you very much for listening, because that's very important. And I look forward very much to hearing and answering your questions in the Q&A session. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ilan. Was that you in the photo?
Oh, yes. So that is me on the Great Wall in 2007. That was my first trip to mainland China 2 years before I ended up moving to Beijing. And so the point of that picture is just to show that when you're walking on the Great Wall, it's a long road, an arduous road, but there's great benefits waiting for you and good pictures as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Martina, you're next.
Hello, everybody. Xiang Hao from Zurich, Switzerland. It's great to have you all here. And thank you, Ilan, also for sticking to your Swiss 10 minutes. That's absolutely fantastic. And of course, thank you, Catherine, for putting this panel together, sharing our perspectives, and especially talking to the students. I hope that this is going to be a long-term exchange as well. And of course, I would encourage the students as well to reach out to us after this discussion and keep in touch. So I will quickly share my screen here. Also a quick presentation. I hope you can see it. Fantastic. So Catherine already kindly introduced me. I work as a business correspondent for Xinhua, freelancer, not fully because I have a lot of other work and mandates to fulfill at the same time. You can see here, I just wrote them down to have the names here as well in case you're interested and want to get in touch with me afterwards and learn a little bit more about those institutions and organizations and companies. And I'll be very happy to share more insights on a bilateral level. I also work for the Chinese star pianist that many of you know, Lang Lang as well. We're actually going to bring his foundation to London and Europe in December. So hopefully we can expand as well on the European continent. We want to bring music education to underprivileged children and schools around the world. The St. Gallen Symposium as well. This is basically like the World Economic Forum in Davos, but by the students. It takes place every year in May for the 51st time in 2022. It's organized fully by the students. We get a lot of exciting speakers like Jack Ma, Jane Goodall, and so on. We try to bridge also to China. We have Huawei as a partner as well. We have the Alibaba Foundation and many star and VIP guest speakers as well every year. So reach out to me in case you're interested and would like to learn a little bit more. We just had an event together with the Schwarzman Scholars at Tsinghua University in Beijing as well. So we probably will have a partnership with the Schwarzman Scholars in the future as well. I'm also working there as a mentor to two very bright students. I can also encourage you to apply for the Schwarzman Scholars Program because you're all interested in China. You just need to be under the age of 28. So I guess for our three panelists, including me, it's a little bit too late, unfortunately, already. And then the Montreux Jazz Festival. This is a legendary music festival that takes place every year on the Lake of Geneva in Switzerland. You might have heard about it, and we brought it to China for the very first time. It was a huge project. We had to deal with a lot of COVID restrictions, a lot of permissions and permits from governments and so on. We had to deal with typhoons and everything, but we made it happen. And as I will talk to you about it later, I'm a strong believer that culture, music, language, everything is really the biggest asset to make an impact in this world and the geopolitical environment that we live in today. And I work for Syngenta as a consultant, the big agri-tech company that is planning a listing in Shanghai on the star market soon. Previously, these were my positions as well. I started off mostly in the Middle East, based in Dubai for Reuters, traveled across the region as well, lived in Egypt, in Yemen for many, many months. And then all of a sudden, I'm at a press conference in Abu Dhabi at the Syrian embassy at the peak of the Arab Spring, and the CCTV, China Central Television cameraman, approaches me and tells me that there are job opportunities in Beijing as well for the state broadcaster. And I didn't have to think twice. 3 months later, I had the visa and the small blue foreign experts book in my hand, and started working in the big famous CCTV building, Dakuchar, the Big Pants building in Beijing for 5 years, because I just felt that China is the future and I needed to jump on this train east. So I did study languages in Switzerland, as well as international relations and economic history and so on. So as Matei, and also I speak a lot of languages. Chinese is the last one, the 9th one, as you heard Catherine say. It's also the most difficult one, even compared to Arabic, because of course we have 40,000 characters, 4 different tone levels, different dialects, and so on. And it's really a lifelong learning and challenge as well. But I guess this is one of the facts why we're so interested, because you will never fully be able to understand everything, and the culture sometimes is still a big mystery. But it's this seeking of knowledge that I think is so important and that unites us all. I mentioned the Montreux Jazz Festival. I just got back from China, actually. I was there for 6 weeks, 50% of that in quarantine, 3 weeks in quarantine. So 2 weeks in a hotel in Shanghai, and then 1 week in Hangzhou. The situation, of course, is very volatile and changes all the time. So you have to really make sure that you are up to date with the latest regulations. It was tough, but I tried to stay optimistic because you have a mission. You want to make an impact with this vision in mind to really cross, the cultures and build bridges between different countries and cultures. So that's just like, a tiny challenge that you have to overcome. And as you can see here on the pictures, it was well worth it. We're going to have it every year now in Hangzhou, as you know, the digital capital of China. What I have noticed in my 3 weeks outside of quarantine is that it's really difficult to get a visa, first of all, to China because of COVID. And you need to have a lot of guanxi, a lot of connections as well. In my case, it helped, of course, that I work for the state news agency Xinhua. I know a few influential people at the Embassy of China here in Switzerland, and also got a work permission as a foreign talent. So this was the Visa R, but it's really difficult also knowing the Schwarzman scholars, for example. They had really big challenges to enter China. So I was very grateful to receive the visa and see what has changed in China on the ground. And what I've noticed is that China is really in a state of isolation because of the closure of the borders. It's very difficult to get in and out. A lot of Chinese do not want to travel because they face, of course, the same quarantine rules when they get back. So the geopolitical environment also, East and West are really in a decoupling phase. And it has been quite surprising to see a lot of foreigners have left China as well. And I think for you all, for our audience today, you students, you have a really big task ahead, a big mission as well, because we need to somehow try to stop this decoupling. And we can only do that by learning, by understanding, to really build this cultural exchange and dialogue again. And for this, of course, Chinese is paramount. We need to learn Chinese. We need to study the culture as well. This is also why I'm in the Confucius Institute for Business London, together with Catherine and our 2 colleagues here, really to improve my Chinese as well. I'm studying business Chinese. Especially because it helps me in my job as a journalist as well. And as a journalist, you need to speak the language where you work in. You can, of course, cover a country and people and so on, but you will never have this firsthand insight and really understand the culture and its people. So because we have COVID, there has been an increase in xenophobia, but also in China, I noticed an anti-foreign feeling, especially, you know, in less foreign areas of China. I was not really traveling in the rural areas this time. I was only in Hangzhou, Shanghai, and Beijing. But what I heard from other friends is that because the borders are still closed, the rise of nationalism, but also, of course, the, you know, racist feelings from Westerners against Chinese on both sides, it always needs two to tango, is really at an all-time low. So learning languages is definitely key, despite, you know, AI and Google Translate and natural language processing and so on. Nothing can replace the joy of learning languages. But really, to have this cultural dialogue, to change the state of affairs, we need to open the borders again as soon as possible. My sources in Beijing are telling me that this will wait until after the party congress in October next year, so we still have some time to go, unfortunately. These are 3 apps that I can recommend. I'm sure you know them already. Pleco as a dictionary, the Chairman's Bow. I love it just to read news stories and articles and have, you know, the characters and translations and audio and visual all together, and then FluentU as well for videos. So these are my contacts, and I'd be very happy to connect with you all. If you have any more questions, I'm here to help. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Martina. Last but not least, Matei.
Great. Thank you, Catherine, and it was great listening to you both, Martina and Ilan. So I'm not going to share any slides from my side. But I will take you through, you know, some of the connections that I have with the Chinese language and culture and how it links to my career. I guess in my case, my career path has really been with one company since graduating. So it's been 15 years in the same company. It's an energy company called Equinor. It's Norwegian based, and I'm right now in Oslo, Norway on a first business trip since the beginning of the pandemic. So that's quite exciting. And I'm responsible in the company for renewable energy, and more specifically in the North Sea, the development of offshore wind activities. Originally, I'm from Romania, but I grew up in France and I studied in the UK. And then my career has taken me quite a few places across the globe, from Norway to Brazil, and then back to the UK with some shorter assignments in Equatorial Guinea, in Algeria, and in China, actually. And the reason why I'm mentioning all these places is that in a way my life journey has exposed me to learning new languages, similar to you, Martina, and Ilan, from a quite young age onwards. And this is a passion that I have really tried to nurture throughout the years. But out of the 8 languages that I had the opportunity to learn, Mandarin is definitely the most challenging, but maybe because of that also the most rewarding experience that I have had. So I started actually studying Mandarin first at university for 1 year, but unfortunately I had to put it on hold when I started my career, because it was a very busy time learning a new job and also learning the language of my adoption country at the time, Norway. So I always wanted to pick up again Chinese, and 10 years later, when I returned to live in London, I had the opportunity to pick it up again. So I've now been studying Mandarin for the last 6 years, and 4 of them at CLCB, at LSE. And I've been managing to reach, I guess you could call it probably an advanced level. I can have, for example, have conversations on relatively complex topics, read my way through newspaper articles in Chinese, but I still have quite a lot to improve going forward. So in my case, actually, initially, I was really learning Mandarin out of curiosity and out of personal interest. It wasn't necessarily with kind of a career aim in mind. I really thought this would be the best way to open a window into a culture and history of a country that has culture and history second to none. And actually, learning Mandarin has proven super rewarding in my personal life. It's helped me make many Chinese friends, get immersed in their culture. And of course, when traveling across China, it was a totally different experience and the source of so many unforgettable memories. But of course, what I didn't necessarily suspect when I started learning Mandarin is that I would also be able to put my skills to the test in a professional context. And that's what I managed to do a couple of years ago when I went to Beijing to spend a few months at my company's offices there as business development manager for China. And I work in the energy industry. It's a sector in which China's role is key. It's actually both the largest energy market in the world, but it's also a place where a lot of future technologies and innovations are being shaped. For instance, renewable energy, China is by far the biggest player. So speaking Chinese was definitely a key factor in a way that helped me land that job in our Beijing office. So what I thought I would do in the next few minutes is just share a few reflections of actually how being able to understand the Chinese language and culture helped me in that assignment, and maybe share some of the lessons that hopefully will be relevant for those of you who will have business careers in China as well. My experience is that understanding the language and the culture is essential in a business context. It's of course possible to use interpreters, but there's a big risk there, and that is that if you rely exclusively on translation, you lack the cultural context, and this can easily lead to being literally lost in translation. So in a relationship-based culture such as the Chinese one, there are often complex norms that you need to follow when you engage with other people. For example, understanding the concept of face, the differences between Chinese and Western value systems, for instance, the collective versus individual, the short versus the long-term orientation, the direct versus the indirect approaches. I guess we got a good illustration in the video that Ilan showed about that. But also the business etiquette, the hierarchy and the protocol, the importance of relationship building, and all of these factors, all of these cultural factors can be the difference between business success and business failure. If you're not aware of them, it means that you're not going to be as effective in building relationships, either personal or of a business nature. So for this reason, I really think that learning the culture should be an inseparable part of learning the language. And this is actually what I benefited greatly from the CLCB program at LSE. Both culture and language helped me a lot when I was working in China. And at the time, despite my Chinese language being advanced, I was not yet fluent. But I could, while using interpreters during business meetings to understand kind of the details of what was really being discussed on a technical level, I was able to speak Chinese and understand the cultural codes, before the meetings, after the meetings, understand also what was going on during the meetings on a general level. And this allowed me to really connect in a more direct way with our counterparts and to build a rapport with them. So all in all, getting to know the cultural nuances of the country that you're working with will really help you avoid misunderstanding, and it will help you build a social relationship. And this is really important. So my company, as I mentioned, is a Norwegian company. From the Norwegian culture, I got used to having a clear and detailed agenda set before each meeting with very specific business objectives that we need to achieve. When working in countries that have a strong relationship-based culture, such as China, it's still important to have all that, but it's definitely not a guarantee for success. So spending time before, after, and in between each business meeting to get to know each other, it's really fundamental. If you're aware of it, and if you're willing to quickly learn and adapt, it will show your counterpart that you respect their cultural norms and that you're making a step towards them, which will very likely result in a productive business relationship. Anyway, these were just a few reflections based on my own experience. So I'd like to thank you a lot for your attention, and I look forward to discuss this further with you and answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you so much, and thanks three speakers. So let me pass on to Aidan. Hi, Aidan.
Evening, everyone. So I'm just going to give a simple overview of how this Q&A will work. So we have some questions that have been sent in advance, so we'll go through some of those. And also you can send questions either via the chat, and I can then ask the question for you. or you can just put your hand up and then you can ask your question yourself. That hopefully is all clear. Now I'm going to first abuse my position of power and ask my own question. This is a rather maybe simple, not so simple one, but how long would you say did it take you to properly kind of learn the tones regarding pronunciation? That's because in my experience, this is the most painful thing I've ever had to deal with.
Maybe Dr. Catherine can answer to give some tips. If I can volunteer maybe briefly, it is really the most challenging thing. I find the characters are not easy to memorize or to recognize, but I think the basics you can get, around pretty soon, but I'm still struggling with the tones. So if I don't remember, I just speak faster. So in order to hide them, but sometimes even my teacher has to think twice. I think it just needs constant learning. I spend about 15 minutes a day just revising some HSK 6 it is now characters, and really make sure that I also in pinyin draw the strokes. So this really helps me to kind of remember which stroke it was. But I think this is a never-ending learning process. I think even for the Chinese. So this is why it's important really to start learning the characters instead of the pinyin. But I believe that even the young generation of Chinese, and I've noticed this now again in China, even though they still have to handwrite the Gaokao exam, and at university everything is still in handwritten form, they, I think, also struggle not just with writing the characters now, handwriting, but also the tone levels more and more. So it's not just the Laowai, the foreigners who, have a hard time.
Can I jump in? So I think I made the mistake of not focusing on tones when I first started learning Chinese all the way back in 2007. And I did, it wasn't until I got to China and I got into a taxi and told the taxi driver where I wanted to go with clearly the wrong tones, and he just looked at me like I was from another planet. So I would recommend that you learn the tones from the start. I drill my tones every day with Duolingo. It's quite sort of simple stuff, but it really helps. And then the other tips basically would be do fun stuff, watch movies, listen to songs, and actually talk with real Chinese people, and then that will be a great way that you can really improve the tones rather than just kind of constantly learning from books.
Yeah, I definitely would second that, and I also, similar to you, Martina, and the beginning of your journey, Ilan, still struggle with the tones, but listening to Chinese people talk, whether it's friends or movies or songs, as you are saying, Ilan, is actually, you kind of get the melody of the language, right? And it's much easier to remember that way.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll go with one of the questions that's sent in advance. And as I said before, if you've got any questions you want to ask, just put it in the chat or put your hand up. So the first question, which goes to everyone, at the start of your China-related careers, what were the most challenging new cultural differences in your workplace, and how did you adapt? If you could go from like the same process as it was before. So Martina, you could, or Matei actually.
If you want to start, Martina, feel free. Otherwise, I can jump in. No, I think in my case, really, working with business development in China, I think one of the key cultural differences that I met very early on was this difference between the direct and indirect approaches. So, working for a Northern European company, we have a quite direct and literal way of taking things in business conversations, and also an expectation that things will move fast and according to at least quasi linear process, which is not necessarily the experience that I had when engaging with business partners in China. So I think what it taught me was really the need to have that kind of flexibility to understand actually that people in China, business people in China work in a different way. They need to first understand who you are, build that kind of rapport, build that kind of relationship, and test a bit the grounds, test a bit, what are really your motives and how you are approaching that business opportunity before getting to the core of the discussions. And it took some, trial and error, but it was quite an exciting process.
Okay, so, sorry, Martina. Okay.
Go ahead, Ilan, please.
Okay. So if we're talking about challenges, I think that when you sort of first start interacting with people and organizations in China, things are very different, and there's a period of frustration where you're sort of wondering why things are done so differently. And so I think that one way to sort of get over that, which I think it will happen to everyone, is basically just to take more time to understand and to accept as well that things are done differently in China, as they are in every part of the world. But perhaps there's sort of some peculiarities, sort of ways of working that just, if you're from the UK or whatever, that we're just very much not used to. I mean, I think, like, in terms of the indirect communication, it's really interesting, because I think British people can be very indirect as well. This kind of whole issue of politeness. So things will be very odd, but if you can just accept that if it's reflected on the other side. I mean, Chinese people, look at British people or whoever and probably think, wow, that's crazy. So if you just accept, then you'll probably be able to overcome those challenges quicker.
For me, when I arrived in 2012, it was a complete culture shock. Coming from Dubai, landing in Beijing. As you know, the Arab culture is very much about embracing each other right away, hospitality. But in China, things take much longer, as Matei and Ilan just pointed out, really establishing trust. And also because back then there weren't so many foreigners working inside CCTV, and us speaking a lot of languages, they thought I was a spy or, doing some other things besides. So I really had 3 or 4 months where I just told myself I need to be, free. I need to have a clear mind, not have any preconceptions or any prejudice, just letting everything come to me and absorbing and soaking everything up, kind of. What was a bit weird to me at the beginning was the hierarchy, especially in a state-owned enterprise, where you have the Lingdao Ren, we had 4 in CGTN, the international channel, and then, the executive producer, the producer, and so on, the editor, and also with the cameraman. I was not used to call them Lausche, teacher, isn't it? So we called each other like teacher. They called me Ma Lausche. I called them blah, 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 Chen Lausche or Wang Lausche. And then it was very interesting. It took me about 5 years to become real good friends. But now we're like brothers and sisters. When I go back, the first people I see are the cameramen. They started calling me afterwards Ma Ziemer, which is Sister Ma. And then before I left in 2017, Ma Tongche, like Comrade Ma. So it shows a little bit the progression and, the relationship building and trust it took. But I think the same applies a little bit to the Swiss mentality, where you take a long time to make friends, but then once you're friends forever. So I really appreciate that. You don't just jump into something, but things need time to develop as well. But that was definitely something I had to get used to. And then afterwards, once I gained the trust from the superiors and the supervisors and so on, I could really basically do what I wanted within the business coverage of journalism, traveling to Pakistan and South Korea and Mongolia and everywhere. But you really need to be patient. But I first of all hope that you can all go back to China soon and experience the country yourself if you haven't been yet.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are starting to get some questions sent in. So the first one is also towards everyone. Is it difficult to find opportunities regarding like use of Mandarin in the workplace if you're not fluent? Or are the opportunities a lot more visible once you are more of a business level of fluency? So that, like, how fluent do you have to be to really start getting these opportunities to work in these sort of areas? So if we could start with Ilan, actually.
Yeah. It really depends who you work for, who you want to work for. I mean, you know, I was working for the UK government in Beijing, and I found that job when I was there. And you know, doing my job as my first job at the embassy as an entry clearance officer, I didn't need to speak Mandarin at all. But then, of course, I got you know, an opportunity to sort of, you know, have a better role at the embassy, which was kind of more outward facing. I think because I was able to speak some Mandarin. So, you know, they weren't looking for fluency, but they were looking for somebody who could at least engage, you know, at an intermediate level with people that you were going to come across. You know, I would say that the job I had at AIIB, you know, I was actually, I think, pretty much the only foreigner in the bank who could actually speak any Chinese. So that obviously wasn't a requirement for them either. But in my role as sort of responsible for security and travel management, I was dealing a lot with, you know, Air China and lots of Chinese organizations. And so my Mandarin actually, you know, really proved useful. But yeah, I mean, I would say that it really depends. You know, as good as you can make it, that's better. But you know, it also depends, of course, whether you're going to be working in China or the UK. You know, or anywhere else outside of China. So it really depends. But certainly, the better you can make it, the more opportunities that will come to you.
Okay, if we can hear from Matei and then Martina, and then we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, so I guess in my case, I was working for a multinational company. We have quite a lot of local staff in our Beijing office, and then some expats, such as myself. And I think the general experience at the time was that not so many of the expats had prior knowledge of Chinese language. They were taking language courses when there. But it certainly, as I was mentioning in my introduction earlier as well, helped me quite a lot actually to have already a certain level of conversational Chinese from a business perspective as well, not just from the perspective of getting around Beijing. It was in terms of establishing that kind of initial link in a deeper way, in a way, and in a easier way as well with a business counterpart. So I would say that even in the case of a multinational where it's maybe not a prerequisite that you speak Chinese, it's definitely a benefit.
I totally agree. It does depend on the nature of the business, organization, and company. But if you are in China, as I said, you definitely have to learn Chinese, because all the foreigners that I've met who do not speak Chinese in China, they don't last very long, because it's really such a big cultural difference and barrier that you need to overcome that. A lot of foreigners in CGTN, they started learning Chinese when they were there, but I don't want to give it like, you know, a rating, like saying you need to have HSK level 4 or 5, but it definitely helps. The higher you get, the better your job opportunities are, especially when you work for a Chinese SOE. If you really want to, you know, break this kind of cultural ceiling as well a little bit and being trusted. So definitely try to improve as soon as possible if you can be on the ground, or now learning from distance and virtually with videos and films and so on. I think the audiovisual always helps a lot in improving the language when you're not physically there.
Thank you very much. I have managed to grab 5 extra more minutes for this Q&A. So I would advise our panelists to be a bit quick, only just so we could get through everything, so everyone has their questions answered to some extent. So actually, I've got two specific questions for you, Martina. So the first one is, how important was the role of mentorship and networking in regards to your field of work? And the second one is, could you please tell us more about how your experience in China and the ability to speak Chinese has helped you as a communications consultant?
Those are absolutely great questions, and I'm happy to answer them in more detail a bit later as well, personally, because we're running out of time maybe. So first of all, in terms of mentorship, I think this is the most important thing. Mentorship is not just, me as the mentor teaching the mentee, but with the Schwarzman Scholars, for example, it's really two ways. I can learn so much from them. Two students I have there right now, one is into AI music. He's already, building algorithms and new AI songs with Python and stuff. So I just try to connect him with people in the music industry in China, outside of China, with record labels, but also with AI companies and so on. So just mainly the network and inviting him to events. The other one wants to go into international relations and diplomacy. She has a background in political campaigns in the US. So I help her with connections to former or current diplomats in China and also ex-China former embassy staff and so on. So this is absolutely super important, not just among us young people, but really also the older generation. It needs to be an intergenerational dialogue. This is also where the St. Gallen Symposium that I mentioned before comes in, because it's really all about this. We have to learn from the older generation and the younger generation, because we're such in a disruptive environment right now with new technologies and the pandemic. So mentorship is absolutely vital. The second question in terms of communication, yes, absolutely. Living in China for 5 years, working as a journalist, we had Chinese editing systems. When I arrived there in 2012, we still had tapes, like, old school dusty editing machines and stuff. So it was really kind of moving from a stone age into the ultra modern era with 3D, studios and P2 cameras and all that stuff. So it was really, I think, the honeymoon of the economic development of China that I was able to witness. And I couldn't have survived or being a reporter in the field on the ground with only, Chinese teams and camera crew traveling across Asia without Chinese. It was absolutely necessary. They could have given me a translator, but this is not, the challenge that you want to have and the experience as a journalist, especially.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have one more question, a specific one. And then I have one that we can end on for everyone. So this question is for Ilan. What experiences informed your decision and career trajectory to go towards conflict mediation, especially in the context of communicating across other cultures?
Okay, interesting question. So, I think some of my experiences in China really informed my sort of desire to learn more about conflict resolution. And I obviously, I don't think such a course really like that exists in China. I mean, maybe some places, mediation is usually taught as an add-on to sort of, law programs. And I'm not a lawyer. I didn't study law, and I'm not interested in resolving disputes using law. My focus is on, sort of facilitating dialogue and building understanding between people of different cultures. I chose to do it in Israel because I was born there, and I wanted to understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, specifically because it's something that's very meaningful for me, and I wanted to see if I could contribute to that. But I've found certainly that mediation is a growing sort of profession. It's not really recognized as a profession in many places, but I think that we need more mediators in the world, and we need more people who are paid to do mediation, because it is a very powerful tool of building understanding between people. And so, because of my undergraduate studies in East Asian studies, and my experience living in China, and my Mandarin ability, I hope that I can act as kind of like a bridge and a mediator, also certainly a cultural mediator, to build understanding between Chinese people and non-Chinese people. And I think we need more of those kind of people. So if you're interested to connect more about mediation, then please get in touch with me, LinkedIn or something after, and we can talk more about mediation and conflict resolution. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the last question, and this goes to everyone, and we can start with Matei. So the question is, this is regarding why the difficulties with visas. So have you encountered any problems recently when applying for a visa because of your political views, or have heard stories of applicants not receiving them due to perhaps previous views or comments on China? So obviously this is linking to the glowing confrontation between the West and the East.
I've never experienced issues with my visas. I was always applying, for a business visa for a very specific kind of business purpose. So maybe other people have other experiences, but at least that is mine.
Martina?
So at this point in time, it's very difficult to get visas for students, for teachers, for family members, at least those I know wanting to go from Switzerland. I have a good friend. He is a CEO in a chocolate company here in Switzerland. He wanted to go to China because they opened their first branch there. He wanted to train his staff. He couldn't get a visa. So from at least this country here, it's almost impossible to go there right now. You must really have excellent connections or this visa R status as a foreign talent. It's really incredibly tough right now. But as a last word from my side, I would like to say that despite this very toxic and geopolitical environment between the West and China, this should not discourage you from studying Chinese, because we need you. We need Chinese speakers. We need people who really understand China and the culture. Because only with that we can actually have, a brighter future altogether, and also for the next generation create new opportunities. So I would really want to motivate you all to keep, high spirits and jiayou, keep studying Chinese and the Chinese culture.
So I guess interesting. I get to end on a question about visas. Obviously, I did it from the other side. I was actually living in Shanghai before, at the start of the pandemic. I had a residence permit. I had an apartment there. I actually kind of unfortunately quit my job in December 2019. Not good timing, and then left to do some work outside of China. So terrible plan. But anyway, it's just one of those things. It's one of those events that sort of shakes things up, and governments are just kind of very worried, about importing, cases and everything. So I can understand why it's so hard. What I would say is, I know for a fact that there's some exemptions. So I think, if you can if you can demonstrate that you're involved in some kind of, emergency sort of trade or scientific purposes, or, if you're able to, get some kind of a diplomatic reason to be in China, then you can potentially get around that. But I think, Martina's point is a good one. It's really all about, connections. If you can find an organization that can pull the levers, in the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then you might be able to get there. But otherwise, I think it would probably be almost impossible. And we just have to kind of be patient. And when we sort of things are a bit more normal, we can travel again. But there's things that you can do outside of China. So focus on that, and then when the travel starts up again, get applying for those visas basically. Oh, and in terms of political issues, well, I mean, it's hard to comment. I mean, I didn't have that experience myself, but I'd say it's possible. But I've not heard anything about that. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Aidan. Good job. Manage on time. So before I pass on to Neil, just very briefly, so for those of you, I will share the slides later, but if you want to connect with our speakers tonight, they are very easily to be able to find on LinkedIn. So just search for their names and you will find them. I'm very happy to share this later after the event. Okay, Neil, over to you.
I just would like to say thank you. Thank you, Ilan, Martina, and Matei. There's such value in hearing from those who've had experiences ahead of having the opportunity to have those experiences yourself. I can see nodding heads of appreciation. So sometimes there's what you say, but other times there's just knowing that things are possible, even in the difficult circumstances we find ourselves in at the moment. And I think that's really, really valuable. So thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, for organising the event. I know it was something that our students asked for, and it's great that we're able to do that. And to our students, the thing I would really encourage you to do is, if you would like to contact one of these three brave people, don't be shy. Do it, because the offer is genuine. And if you have a question, then then go for it. Call their bluff. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you around the CLCB sometime. And yeah, Catherine, let me pass back to you for the final one.
Thank you very much, everyone, again. And luckily, our students are not going to China till summer. I think there's plenty of opportunities for them. They are really looking forward, and yeah, but it's just wonderful to hear your stories, and thank you very much. This is actually our very first China panel discussion, and we felt this is so encouraging. We had a lot of inquiries, and I was discussing with Neil, maybe we can do it, make it more established, and just so honored to have the three of you as our first guests. So thank you very much, and also to all the students. We can talk about how to study tones separately, but I think, as you know, it's not easy, it's not straightforward, but hey, you can do it. Believe me. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening then.
Thank you very much. 再见.
Bye.
For having us.